News Today with WDW News Today. I'm Tom Corliss of WDWNT.com. Please like this video, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to make sure you never miss the latest from the Disney theme parks all around the world. Coming up, the news for January 12th, 2025. But first, I got to mention this because we were sold out for several days and we have acquired more staterooms. So back on sale, probably temporarily, and you'll want to hurry, is our History on the High Seas, a WDWNT cruise. So we started with 25 staterooms. We've now added another 40, but I will tell you that the wait list was pretty full for this event, and so we reached out to those folks a little bit in advance. So at this point, some of those 40 rooms are already gone, but we think we're going to sell out again. So this is a very important warning. Number one, we got very lucky that the stateroom type and price did not change. So we're still selling veranda rooms at the price we were selling them at before. But this is a special cruise celebrating the history of Disney Cruise Line and also celebrating WDWNT. We, of course, will be there. Myself and Eric and many more staff members will be on board. But also on board will be Imagineers and others who helped make Disney Cruise Line happen, including Jane Alcorn, who's going to give us a tour of Castaway Cay because she worked on the island, creating that space. Turning it from what it was, for many of you probably know what it was, into what it is now. And then some other individuals who are instrumental in developing the Disney Cruise Line business will be there as well. We hope to have a few more to announce as time rolls on, but you can see who's announced so far on our website. To register for the cruise, you want to go to events.wdwnt.com. It is this September. It is towards the end of the month. It's a great, we have a great rate for the cruise, and that price does include the event fees. So similar to our on-land events where we have Imagineers and such, there is an event fee, which we have tacked on to the price of the cruise, but the price of the cruise was so great that it's still overall a fantastic price. And the cruise goes to both islands. We're going to Castaway Cay and Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point. It's a great itinerary, and then one of the sea days, we're going to have several presentations from those folks who created Disney Cruise Line. And it's also just a great opportunity for all of us to hang out and for you to make friends with us, to make friends with others you haven't met, other Disney fans, etc. So go to events.wdwnt.com to register now. Again, we do not know if there will be more staterooms, and if there are more staterooms at some point, we tend to believe A, they will be more expensive, and B, we can't guarantee that they'll be available, but I tend to think there'll be a different category and a different price should we need to add more on again. Or there is the distinct possibility that Disney will tell us no, that they are full and we can't get any more room. So this may be the last call to join us for History on the High Seas, a WDWNT cruise. Please go check out more information and sign up at events.wdwnt.com. Now beginning with the news. In a recent article from the Wall Street Journal, one we'll be talking about a lot here at the top of the show, Walt Disney Imagineers have shared their stories of the fall and rise of WDI during and after Bob Chapek's time leading the Walt Disney Company. Bob Chapek was named CEO shortly before the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Before that, Chapek served as the chairman of Disney Parks, Experiences, and Products since the segment got that new name in 2018. And prior, he was the chairman of Walt Disney Parks and Resorts beginning in 2015. When he took over park operations then, budgeting and schedules were put on the forefront for Walt Disney Imagineering, as Chapek believed that WDI had not been held to the same disciplinary level as the rest of the company. According to the WSJ article, this was huge and for many Imagineers an unwelcome culture shock. Bruce Vaughn and Craig Russell served as Chief Creative Executive and Chief Design and Project Delivery Executive, respectively, at the time of the Chapek takeover. During his tenure from 2020 to 2022, Chapek replaced the pair with Bob Weiss, the president of Walt Disney Imagineering, from 2016 to 2022. He also brought in others to help manage costs and budgets for upcoming projects, and it says here, senior financial executives were visiting WDI daily, sitting down to approve or disapprove budget items, even tiny ones, line by line. Weiss wrote in his memoir, Dream Chasing, that's what he shared. Over the years, Imagineering had expanded and downsized depending on the projects in the works. In fact, after the opening of Shanghai Disneyland in 2016, things took a turn for the worse. Per the article, the company lost many veteran designers after it offered buyouts to Imagineers who had been there at least 20 years. Due to budget cuts and limited manpower, senior park executives also lost trust in WDI. As such, plans for several major Marvel attractions were suspended, in addition to a plan to refurbish Disneyland's aging Tomorrowland. More on that in a few moments. But it wasn't fun anymore, said Theron Skis, an Imagineer for 23 years who left in 2020 and now runs a themed entertainment consulting firm. Combined with COVID-19 and Chapek taking over as CEO in 2020, things got worse. Many Imagineers were furloughed, and later over 400 were laid off. Those remaining were soon told that they would be forced to move to Florida as part of a larger corporate relocation. The relocation of WDI from their longstanding home in Glendale, California, to Lake Nona in Orlando, Florida, was officially canceled, though, in 2023. Imagineers who made arrangements or had already moved to Lake Nona were offered the opportunity to stay or relocate back to California at the expense of the Walt Disney Company. Quote, some people were screaming with joy and others were crying because they had bought a house, said former Imagineer David Kalbitzer, who is now a producer and consultant. In late 2022, Bob Chapek was fired and the former CEO Bob Iger stepped back into the role. And the next year, Iger and Josh D'Amaro, named chairman of Disney Parks Experiences and Products in 2020, asked former Imagineer Bruce Vaughn to lunch at a seafood restaurant, and during the meeting, Vaughn fully expected to play a mentor role, but was surprised when the conversation shifted to the plan to nearly double Disney's investment in parks, cruise ships, and related technology to $60 billion over the next decade. That blew my mind, said Vaughn, who started his career in movie visual effects before working at Imagineering for 23 years and then as a startup CEO and Airbnb executive. Upon his return to WDI, Vaughn's mission had been to build attractions that expand capacity so more people can spend more time and money at the parks. After the COVID-19 pandemic, Disney's theme parks saw a positive rebound. Now attendance has flattened out despite financial growth driven in part by price increases. Another statement from the WSJ article claims that current and former employees say Vaughn needs to reignite morale and end disconnects with corporate executives. Inspired by the Imagineers in Shanghai designing the new Zootopia land, largely on their own during the pandemic, he has already delegated power and resources to Imagineers who work at the company's resorts in Orlando and overseas so they can handle more work themselves, from designing models to fixing quality issues. Vaughn has also brought back many retired WDI employees to serve as mentors for the new and younger Imagineers. Quote, we're very disciplined and we manage the budget and schedule, I think, excellently, he said. The challenge, he added, is there's not a science to this. We don't ever build the same thing. As Disney Imagineering works to rebuild after poor leadership and the pandemic, it's also about to see a new CEO take over at the Walt Disney Company, which we expect to be Josh tomorrow. Let's stop and talk about all of this for a second. Now, the Chapek years very publicly played out in front of us and most definitely on this channel and here at WDWNT.com. Don't need to dig all that back up, but obviously now we're starting to hear stories from that time, and the things we told you were rumored back then have all come out to be the truth of the situation, which was from the time Bob Chapek stepped in 2015, there was a new focus on budgets and timelines and things of that sort. Now, to play devil's advocate, is it good that there's a division in a company that's constantly over budget and constantly missing deadlines? No, it's not great. Now, some of the budget thing, I think, is just needing to understand the nature of the beast that is Walt Disney Imagineering. Like Bruce Vaughn just said in that piece, very often WDI is doing things that have never been done before, and so you can guess what a budget will be, and sometimes maybe that'll be okay, and most of the time it probably won't be. Most of the time there will need to be an increased budget because things happen. Things happen. Sometimes they're not necessarily because it's the first time something's being done. Sometimes you just run into problems or there's delays or whatever, or a pandemic hits or whatever the case may be. But the fact that they were, again, running through budgets, even small budgets, small projects, line by line, is really indicative of what that period was all about. And Bob Weiss creatively was at the top of WDI towards the end of all that. But Barbara Buza, who of course came from Gensler, Barbara was kind of brought in to be the logical side of things and be all about the budgets and the timelines and things like that. Now, that being said, through the Bob Chapek era, I don't know that more projects were on, certainly more stuff was on budget. I don't know if more stuff was on time. I think delays continued on and on and on with many, many projects. But I think budgetary, and we saw the finished product, there were budgetary constraints that maybe in the past would have been fought through. Maybe Imagineers towards the finish line would have been like, okay, we really need this, we really need that, can we add this back in, blah, blah, blah. And famously throughout the Chapek era, there were a lot of cuts made, and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge being one of those things that certainly suffered for those cuts. You know, a lot of cuts were made. Look, we are still very much in this recovery period. Number one, do I think all morale is fixed at Walt Disney Imagineering and within the Disney company? No, because there was a lot to roll back. A lot of damage had been done. And I remember famously when Bob Chapek was fired, that's what happened. Sorry, I remember people were fighting me. They're like, he wasn't fired. Yeah, he was fired. Famously, I said, at some point though, did we go off the cliff? Was it too late to get back on? Like we had already jumped. And in some cases, yes, and in many cases, I think no. I think there have been things to me that say we are in a new era and that things are going to be okay. Now, are there lots of things that you and I, as hardcore Disney fans, still have problems with? Absolutely. There's still the case of paid FastPass. There's what's going on with DAS. And then as it relates to WDI, I think there are projects that maybe you and I raise an eyebrow on, which would be Zootopia Better Together. I don't think that turned out great. We did that review already. I won't get into it too much. That and some of the DVC resort projects around the world that kind of harm the thematic integrity of the places they've been placed. Looking at you, Polynesian Tower, Island Tower at Polynesian. And then we look at the closure of Muppet Vision and Rivers of America and things like that, and certainly different segments of fans have their problems with those projects and where they've chosen to put them. But overall, quality-wise, I think we've seen a big shift, and I know morale-wise, in the Imagineers that I talk to, I've seen a big morale shift too. Now, the larger problem is, and Bruce alludes to this, and it's certainly throughout the Wall Street Journal piece, is the loss of knowledge. The big losses were, and the Wall Street Journal piece seems to imply that Disney really wasn't aiming to get rid of the older Imagineers from the moment Shanghai was done. I don't think that was the correlation. Shanghai was not the correlation. Was staffing reduced post-Shanghai? Yeah. But when they really started to target the long-term folks at WDI, the people who had big salaries because they were high-ranking and had a lot of seniority, that came a couple of years later. Like Joe Rohde didn't get pushed out when Shanghai opened. It was a little bit after that. So there's not that much correlation there. But the loss of institutional knowledge was the biggest problem, and I think that's still a fight now. I look at things like the Zootopia show, and I feel like most definitely my feeling on that is not that the people working on it weren't talented, not that they didn't know what they were doing. The problem was, I think, they didn't know how to fit that into that park because the institutional knowledge of what Animal Kingdom is and what the direction should be that was lost when Joe was pushed out maybe wasn't there. Now, we saw a shift, the originally announced project for Dinoland USA, when they showed us the Blue Sky phase, they showed us a Zootopia area and a Moana area. Now, when Joe Rohde came back in as a consultant, we saw that morph into Tropical Americas, which is probably a theme that better fits the park overall, because the park is segmented by areas of the Earth, except for Pandora, which is an area of a alien planet. But otherwise, you have, Africa and Asia and tropical Americas. That makes a lot of sense. And so that's where that institutional knowledge comes in. And sometimes what Imagineering wants and what the Walt Disney Company want are two different things. We'll talk about in a moment how there's a fight for original ideas and how the company's not really interested in them. That is part of the problem. But nonetheless, institutional knowledge that would be integral to pulling off these major projects and making them fit in where they are going are things that were lost during that period, and it's so important to restore that. And they've done a bit of that, but I think there's still a lot of institutional knowledge missing. And I think these younger folks at WDI need more of that. I will tell you, I have a blessing of, we've done so many Imagineer reunion events, and I get to spend time around these folks, and I have learned more from just spending a couple hours around these people who spent decades in those halls of Glendale. I learned more in a couple hours spent with them than I've spent in a lifetime of visiting theme parks. Things that, as guests, we would never be able to pick up on, even as the most frequent guests imaginable. So I think that knowledge is undoubtedly important, and I hope there continues to be a focus on that as we move into this next generation. For the most part, the piece is very positive about where things are going, and very honest about what a hard and rough transition period this has been from pre-Chapek to post-Chapek, and the fight there is to save the soul of Walt Disney Imagineering. And I think there are lots of people in that fight, and that makes me happy. But again, is everything the way you and I want it to be? Not yet. And it sounds like it's not even the way that Bruce Vaughan and Josh D'Amaro and many of the people that are going to shape the future of the Disney company want it to be just yet. There is still a lot of fight left to be had at this point. We'll move on, talk about some other things of interest that were in that Wall Street Journal piece, including about the Marvel e-ticket. They finally just admitted that supposedly it was due to a lack of faith in WDI that executives decided to not move forward with the original intended e-ticket attraction for the Marvel lands around the world. You may remember that there was a Quinjet attraction that was first previewed originally for the Hong Kong Disneyland Stark Expo area. That was previewed, and then later they announced it for Disney California Adventure. But then it was omitted from later plans. Finally in 2021, they opened Avengers Campus in California, but it opened with one ride and what felt like a lot missing because they didn't move forward with that e-ticket. So again, it was said during the Chapek era that they just did not have the faith in WDI to deliver that on time and on budget. And I will tell you, I have heard rumblings about that Quinjet ride from several different folks through the years. They had already spent hundreds of millions of dollars on R&D on that thing. It was something completely new, and it was going to cost, I believe, over $1 billion to execute it. Again, all rumor and hearsay, but worth mentioning. And either way, what's being said in this article is purely they were just afraid that maybe the budget would rise, maybe they would not be able to hit a deadline with it, and so they just didn't move forward with it. Of course, now we have two very different attractions taking that space in the Avengers Campus expansion in California. We have the Tower of Terror inspired ride with Spider-Man and other Avengers happening in Hong Kong, but according to that WSJ piece, Chapek and other executives canned the project because of no faith in WDI. Continuing on, Imagineers shared with the Wall Street Journal that continued attempts to bring original ideas and original stories to the Disney parks have been consistently rejected by executives. Since Bob Iger took over as CEO the first time in 2005, Disney parks have received new lands and attractions almost exclusively based on existing IP, from Star Wars to Marvel to Avatar, and original attractions have been rethemed in some cases, looking at you, Maelstrom to Frozen Ever After and things of the like. And of course, I already talked about this, what's happening right now. Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, the Rivers of America and Frontierland being replaced by a Cars area. They're building a Villains-themed land behind that, which is kind of half and half, right? That is intellectual property, but they're also building an original concept, an original place for those villains to exist, an original story for them to exist within. But mostly IP attractions are what's been on the docket for WDI the last 20 years. But either way, this trend has gone against Walt Disney Imagineering's long history of being able to exercise creative freedom and bring original concepts to life. Of course, Pirates of the Caribbean, the Haunted Mansion, Country Bear Jamboree, the list goes on and on and on. Movie characters have been a part of the park since Disneyland opened in 1955, but so have those original stories like Jungle Cruise and more that have become such a part of the Disney parks experience that they are as well known as many of those IPs that exist within these berms. But Imagineers have struggled under the tenures of both Iger and his short-lived successor, Bob Chapek, and I would dare say onto this regime as well. Here's an interesting quote from the piece. At every all-hands meeting, I would be asked if we'd get to create new Imagineering original stories again, said Barbara Bouza, who was the president of WDI from 2020 to 2024. And she has since become an executive at the architecture firm Canon Design. There you have it. It is no surprise that there are people in Walt Disney Imagineering who have an appetite to tell original stories. They're not, in many cases, allowed to do so because what the parks and management believe in currently is that IP will be the driving force behind attendance and revenue. And I'm going to put up my usual fight, which is how many past examples of great original storytelling turning into profit centers do we need? Here's a great example from the last 20 years. Hong Kong Disneyland's first expansion. One of the most important aspects of that was original storytelling in two particular lands and attractions, one being Grizzly Gulch, which is home to Big Grizzly Mountain Runaway Mine Cars, and the other being Mystic Point, home to Mystic Manor, which is home to Lord Henry Mystic and Albert the Monkey. Now, Lord Henry Mystic and particularly Albert have become very profitable things for Hong Kong Disneyland. That store at the exit of Mystic Manor is filled with constantly changing merchandise themed to Mystic Manor. He has become such a point of pride for that park. It is a thing that is purely theirs, that belongs to them, and is clearly something the audience has grabbed onto. That merchandise sells out. Every time they release new items, they sell out nearly instantly in that shop. And then look at the examples of, I just mentioned Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion, Jungle Cruise, Country Bears. All of these things continue to exist and continue to make money for this company. They are reasons people go to the parks. Pirates of the Caribbean just inspired a bar, which obviously is another profit center based around, and I know it's an IP because there was a movie series, I get it, but that bar really is not about the movie series. That bar is purely built upon the legacy of the attraction. There are nods to the movies, but that is not a selling point. No one's booking that reservation because of the Pirates of the Caribbean movie series. They're booking it because they love Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's exciting to find another way to spend time within that world. Look at what the Haunted Mansion Parlor has done for Disney Cruise Line, such a success that it's on 2 consecutive ships. The amount of money that had to be made from drinks and souvenir mugs and all the merchandise sold by Disney Cruise Line just the last couple of years, they're using it as a wedding venue. Disney Weddings is renting out the Haunted Mansion Parlor on the Destiny as a venue for people to get married in. I don't know what more proof Disney needs that great original storytelling can be just as profitable and just as timeless as any movie or streaming series or anything else. And I know I am preaching to the choir with everyone at WDI that's watching that believes in original storytelling, and all of you watching that believe in original storytelling like I do. And we need to find a way to convince Disney executives that there is power in original storytelling. Let Imagineering, and I'm not saying all of it, obviously, I don't expect you to build $1 billion land based on nothing, based on a completely original idea. I would love that, but I don't expect that. I expect that for that kind of investment, you need Star Wars and Marvel. But what is so bad about a ride or a show every so often that is a completely original thing? What is so wrong with believing in the creativity of these people? It is one thing to not believe in WDI from a budget or scheduling standpoint. It is a whole nother thing to not believe in your people's creativity for a department that is purely about creativity. That is nuts. And that is part of the fundamental, one of the fundamental issues within the Walt Disney Company today is not believing in their creative people. And I know we've seen a big turn under DeMauro and Bruce and since Bob's return to focus back on the creative people. But these have been good first steps. The next step is to let them cook. The next step is to let them create original stories and see what a difference that can make in your parks and resorts all around the world. And again, is a Haunted Mansion bar and a Pirates of the Caribbean bar, is that the furthest we can go? And those aren't even original stories because they are based on existing attractions. I'm just trying to illustrate that if you make new original attractions today, you will benefit 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now. People will fall in love with these things, and over the decades, they will become so much more powerful than most of your movie IP. It's happened before, it can happen again. It just needs the belief from executives that their creative people can do it. Some other interesting things were revealed in that article. This is kind of no secret, but originally Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run was supposed to have 5 different missions, but due to budget and time constraints, we ended up with just the one at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World. Of course, this May, we're going to end up on some brand new missions under the Mandalorian and Grogu banner, coming May 22nd to both Disneyland and Disney World. But again, revealed in this article, there were officially supposed to be 5, and only one happened. Again, also revealed in that article is that, this was rumored for so long, but first real confirmation of this, that there were in fact plans to refurbish and reimagine Tomorrowland at Disneyland Park, but Disney executives deemed it not worth the investment. Rumors of a large refurbishment of Tomorrowland at Disneyland began really making the rounds in 2019 when word broke of a multi-year $600 million reimagining of the land that was set to be complete sometime between 2025 and 26. The rumor persisted into 2022 when it was expected to be a headlining announcement at that year's D23. Disneyland's Tomorrowland has been in a state of decay for many years now, peppered with defunct attractions and empty spaces, following a series of new Tomorrowland update attempts, including the failed one in 1998, I would say, that turned Space Mountain sort of brown or copper. Of course, we had the rocket rods, which didn't last very long and left the Tomorrowland People Mover track empty all of these years, and the list goes on and on and on. There's an empty theater in front of Space Mountain, etc. But either way, the Wall Street Journal piece confirms that the rumors were not unfounded and that Imagineering did indeed make plans for the aging land. However, the plans were put forth during the short-lived tenure of CEO Bob Chapek, and it was decided, again, to not believe in WDI and to spend the money elsewhere. I tend to believe this is back on the table for after. We have this whole list of things that are part of this $60 billion being spent around the world, like Villains Land and the Cars area and everything going on at DCA, a ton of new rides that come into DCA in the next 5 years. My hope, I'm going to knock on wood for this, my hope is that once this round of changes is complete, once all these big projects are done, that the next round is the first thing after all this DCA work is done should be to fix Tomorrowland at Disneyland. It's a huge eyesore. It's an embarrassment. It is beyond time to make this happen. So my hope is, I'm not counting on D23 next year, or no, it's this year now. I'm not counting on a D23 this year to hear about it, because I think we got to hear details about these things they're just getting started on Coco and Avatar and all of those things in the Disneyland Forward project. So it's going to be a little more time, but I would hope, maybe 1 or 2 more D23s from now, we will finally get our Tomorrowland announcement and finally get a people mover going through Tomorrowland once more at Disneyland. That same report, we're going to jump over to Disney Cruise Line now, revealed that Walt Disney Imagineering spent $1.8 billion to retrofit the Disney Adventure, almost double the original budget. The unique 4-funnel Disney Cruise Line ship began its life in 2018 as the Global Dream, commissioned by Genting Hong Kong's Dream Cruises. However, Genting went bankrupt before the ship's completion, and Disney acquired the massive cruise ship in 2022. Executives believed the ship to be an absolute bargain at $40 million, which it was. But the ship would soon become the fleet's money pit, as Disney executives figured it would cost about $1 billion to complete the ship, less than half what the company typically spends to build a new vessel. Then the Imagineers got their hands on it. And with the Disney Adventure retrofitting project, Walt Disney Imagineering faced a massive, totally new challenge. The layout of the gigantic cruise ship was designed for casinos and lounges, not for families. The retrofit started in 2023 and was akin to trying to turn a Honda into a Hummer, according to project overseer and former Imagineer Justin Newton. Turning the Global Dream into the Disney Adventure necessitated ripping apart the partially built ship down to its girders, doubling the size of the galleys, adding more stage space, and creating spaces for a dozen restaurants. What started as a retrofit began to amount to a rebuild as Imagineers reworked nearly every aspect of the ship. The final cost of the Disney Adventure was $1.8 billion. That is almost double the original planned budget of $1 billion. The retrofit not only went over budget, of course, the ship went over deadline. It was supposed to have its maiden voyage at the end of last year. It's now going to happen on March 10th of 2026. Actually, well, I can't say anything just yet. Just stay tuned. We'll be talking a lot more about the Adventure very soon. Stay tuned, everybody. But yeah, the Adventure will be Disney's biggest and, according to them, most immersive ship and we'll wait to see that. We are booked on that maiden voyage in March. Well, I can't wait to see this thing. It's going to be weird and wild. But kudos to Bruce Vaughan, WDI, and the company for believing in it and spending the $1.8 billion. I hope it turns out well, but it sounds like the money was there to make it everything they wanted it to be, and so I have high expectations. In response to the Wall Street Journal piece, Joe Rohde, Disney legend and former Imagineering executive, designer and vice president, responded about the tumultuous years at Walt Disney Imagineering. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt from the piece. Quote, "Some Imagineers saw executives as an obstacle that needed to be overcome. They sometimes used a process known internally as progressive seduction to get approval for projects at a smaller scale and then suggest one seemingly small improvement at a time until it was as big as they actually wanted it to be," a person with knowledge of the matter said. This progressive seduction led to executives losing trust in Walt Disney Imagineering to stick to plans, scope, and scale, which resulted in layoffs, budget restrictions, and scrapped projects, including those additional missions for Smuggler's Run, the Reimagine Tomorrowland, and that mega Marvel e-ticket. But Disney legend Joe Rohde posted on Instagram in response to this, he said the following: "There is a paragraph in the Wall Street Journal article about Imagineering that is pretty much a fantasy. It mentions the concept of progressive seduction. This refers to the notion that a team presents a project with a reasonable budget, but fully intends to escalate this budget by adding scope and by misrepresenting the true cost of original scope. I saw this happen once in 40 years. Once. Decades ago. I was a very junior member of a team, and the producer attempted to grow the scope and budget by about 30%. I was standing there in the meeting by the project model when we were told to cut the entire third of the project model off, chuck it and everything it represented, and build what was left. I will not say whether that project went on to completion, but I will say that it is psychotic to believe that a person would keep their job after deliberately deceiving the key executives of a major company to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and strangely naive for a business journal to report it as if it could be true. I have been in charge of projects that have gone over budget, been on budget, and come in below budget. In all cases, the general progression is a reduction in scope from the initial concept. Projects run over budget because of a combination of market forces, required changes in program after capitalization, and the unpredictability of technical innovation. Because there is already a cultural predisposition to imagine artists as irresponsible, it is exceedingly unproductive for designers to behave as such, and the result is not some tricky triumph, but the complete loss of authority over the project. I would not want any young designer to think that progressive seduction was a legitimate form of design behavior recognized by anyone. Nor would I want a young business manager to suspect that this was the case, because it would lead to unproductive relationships within a team structure. I have no idea who the interview source was for this information, but it is described in a rather journalistically evasive way as a person with knowledge of this matter. I would contend that this is unlikely." So a couple of things here. I like that Joe chimed in. I really like this. I like knowing that that's not a game they have to play. That's great. Now, as Joe alludes to, over time, does that stuff happen? Do projects begin and then something gets added back in sometimes? It's happened. Imagineers have fought back to add something back in through convincing people, but it was never, what Joe is saying is the project begins with this scope, and there has never been a case in the history of Walt Disney Imagineering where this full scope is what ended up out there. Even the case of Tokyo Disney Sea. We could rant and rave about Disney Sea all day. But that scope was this, and it somehow became this. It's still the best theme park ever built, but it is undoubtedly not what the full original scope of the creatives was. Now, when this happens, do sometimes Imagineers try to fight back and eventually convince someone to add something back in? Absolutely. That happens. Is it their intent here to then go pitch, let's say this is the full project, is it their intent to go pitch this much of the project and then every couple months ask for another thing? I don't think so. I agree with Joe. I don't think so. Now, I do take umbrage with the last part of that article where Joe says the Wall Street Journal is someone that's just quoted as that they would be someone who would have knowledge of such situations. So here's what I will say. Now, have there been Imagineers throughout history who have claimed to know more than they knew or been involved in projects they weren't actually involved in? Absolutely. Now, at face value, if you're a journalist and you do research and find out, well, yeah, that person was at WDI from this time to this time, and they worked on this and they worked on that, and so there is a bit of authority there, and you could certainly run that back through Walt Disney Imagineering, who clearly, by interviewing Bruce Vaughan and the like, they had access to people currently at Disney for this piece. You could send that back through Disney, and Disney may choose to not fight you on it, and it seems like that's the case here where Disney, I think Disney had the ability to give notes on this article, and I think if things made it to the finish line, it's probably because someone at WDI either didn't want to fight over it or there is some validity to it. Either way, I'll fight Joe a little bit on that because I think it's hard to know what everyone's experiences are. Now, Joe was there for 40 years, and I believe him that he only saw that happen once. Doesn't mean it never happened again, and does it invalidate every quote they got from that person? Who knows? That person could have just made things up. Certainly happened to us in the time we've been around. There are some rumors that were proven to be very valid, and some, there's been a handful over the years that there was no validity to, but there are people who are proven to be at WDI and on certain projects, and so you take, with that amount of vetting done, you run with what you have. And I think that is ethical to do so. If you've done your due diligence, it's ethical to do so. That doesn't mean someone that wasn't, that doesn't mean that someone that was in the room where it happened couldn't make something up. But neither here nor there. But either way, I think it's a really interesting story that the progressive seduction is really interesting, and maybe people believe that to be true. No, I do think things get added back in. I think more often, as Joe said, budgets get continually reduced. That's more likely over time. But I do think things have gotten added back in late stages because they were able to convince executives that something was important to the vision of the project, or that would be important to guests. So I think there's a little bit of truth to everything here. This program is brought to you by our official travel agent sponsor, Be Our Guest Vacations. Your dream vacation begins with Be Our Guests and their concierge team of expert vacation planners. Head on over to wwnt.travel and their team will design your next magical vacation, from the Walt Disney World and Disney Resorts to Disney Cruise Line to Adventures by Disney and more. The best part is their concierge services are 100% free. So book today. Though Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger spin at the Magic Kingdom has been closed since August, the ride's entrance was still visible and you could walk up to it for the past several months, but now construction walls are blocking it from view. The walls wrap around the front of the building underneath the Tomorrowland Transit Authority People Mover. They jut out into the walkway significantly, likely to make space for construction vehicles and the like. Of course, a permit was just filed just a couple weeks ago for a signage change at the attraction. So we assume all these walls are really there for all that signage to be changed. And we don't know how severe it's going to be. Are they just going to change the graphics on the existing signs? Will the existing signage be all ripped down and new signage will go up in full? We'll have to wait and see. We got a look inside Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger spin over the Christmas holiday, but now Good Morning America shared a new look inside, including some updated scenes, including one that will include Buzz Lightyear in that scene for the very first time. In the short clip, Wyatt Winter, the executive producer at Walt Disney Imagineering, stated, what is new here today is actually the scene that's right here behind me, and you see our alien friend opening that airlock so we can head out into space and start our battle with Emperor Zurg. The dimensional green alien figure is brand new to the ride, and you see it moves up and down. If you're watching the video here, that is a completely new thing. Of course, in the ride as it existed before, the aliens were purely wooden flats that were hand painted. That's all they were. Now, in the scene directly after that, when we go into hyperspace, the space scene where we would shoot at Zurg in what used to be the super speed tunnel in Delta Dream Flight, you now won't have to face Zurg alone. Buzz Lightyear has been added into the scene, and Pixar has announced that they created completely new animation for this sequence. So it's going to look all brand new as we fight Zurg alongside Buzz Lightyear in the super speed tunnel. So now, to break down everything we know so far that's new in this attraction, we have new vehicles, we have new guns, or blasters I should say, that have the always-on lights so you can see where you're aiming. We have new targets that are more interactive. There's going to be a lot of fun that comes from that. Beyond that, we have the training bot Buddy. She is going to be in pretty much the very first scene after the load platform as a place for guests to practice with their blasters for the first time. That's a whole new scene. And now we know about 3/4 of the way, I think it's about 3/4 of the way through the ride. When you get to the airlock, which is that tunnel with the red light that spins, that used to be you going into the fuselage of an airplane, by the way. A lot was left over from Dreamflight, kids. Now we know right before that airlock, we're going to have an alien actually pulling on a lever to release the airlock. You go out into space, and we got all new animation in that tunnel for that scene with Buzz Lightyear, and then you'll see Buzz and Zurg in physical form in the next scene, actually battling as was there before, you know, where they take your on-ride photo. That scene will still be there. We don't know how much more has changed. The more we see, the more impressed I am with this refurb finally bringing this attraction up to snuff. I think for many of us, the targets and the vehicles and the blasters would have been enough. We were shocked enough that Walt Disney World was going to do that, because Walt Disney World doesn't always throw a lot of money back into their older attractions. That's at least the vibe they've given us over the last several years. But the more I see, the more impressed I am with how much money is being spent in here and how much effort is going into modernize this attraction so it's relevant to another generation of people. I think it looks great so far. I'm excited to see this when it does reopen. It's set to reopen spring 2026. No exact date given just yet. More details, including brand new and returning effects, have been announced for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at the Magic Kingdom as well. Included in the video shared on Good Morning America, there are new details that have emerged, including confirmation on all new ride vehicles and refreshed audio animatronics figures. Disney also said the mountain will push back against you, and also adding new gold props being used on the mountain for the first time as well. Also hinted at in the video is the return of long inoperable effects. The opening timeframe for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad was also announced late last year. It said that's going to be in the spring as well. Again, no exact date yet. We do know there's that new opening scene once the train leaves the station, going through the Rainbow Cavern. That first lift hill full of hundreds of bats, phosphorescent pools, shimmering stalagmites and stalactites, etc. But Disney also said other bells and whistles. I don't think we have the full breadth of everything changing at Big Thunder yet either, so I think more details are to come. There is now scaffolding around the Pete's Silly Sideshow tent at Magic Kingdom. The meet and greet venue is closed for refurbishment, and the characters are currently meeting outside. Construction walls went up around Pete's Silly Sideshow a week ago, but there's been no scaffolding at the tent. The largest section of scaffolding is between Pete's and Big Top Souvenirs. It's covered in green scrim, which both blocks work from guest view and helps protect crew members from the weather. We didn't see any crew members working when we were there on Monday, January 12th, but the tent has fallen into disrepair over the past several months with normal fading from the sun as well as a tear in the roof, and so there's definitely some work that needs to be done on that exterior, and it is now underway. No end date for this project has been announced just yet. Taiyaki, the popular Japanese fish-shaped street food, has arrived in EPCOT's Japan Pavilion. Is the sweet snack worth a trip around World Showcase? Well, let's find out. Taiyaki retails for $7.73. It's a crispy waffle usually filled with enko or sweet bean paste. Sometimes taiyaki can be soggy. This one was super crunchy and had a good texture. We found the taiyaki at the Kabuki Cafe along the promenade in the Japan Pavilion. You can read our review at WDWNT.com. And yes, we sent Nana, so it's a pretty authentic review. Now that the holidays are over, a Percy Jackson exhibit has arrived at Walt Disney Presents at Hollywood Studios. It includes costumes, props, and more from the Disney Plus streaming series. Guests can catch a limited-time sneak peek of the second season of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, now on Disney Plus as well in the theater. So far, there's no closing date for this exhibit. Also worth noting is that Ariel is back to meeting inside Walt Disney Presents, the Ariel from the live-action film. Entering Walt Disney Presents, guests are welcomed with a Percy Jackson photo backdrop with Greek-style columns, banners, and lightning strikes. In the season, Percy and Annabeth Chase team up with bully Clarice LaRue to journey into the Bermuda Triangle. They search for the Golden Fleece, which can heal Thalia's pine tree that protects Camp Half-Blood, and Grover, who has gone missing. I assume that's not the Sesame Street character. I haven't watched Percy Jackson. I'm sorry. I know many of you are super into it. I haven't seen it. I have no idea. But either way, the first showcase is located near the Ariel meet and greet entrance. Features costumes worn by the characters. 7 outfits from the Camp Half-Blood scene are on display. Another showcase has more props and costumes on display. This one from the Sea Monster scene where Percy must get the Golden Fleece. Annabeth's dagger and Percy's riptide sword are on display as well, along with the costumes and shields from the chariot race scene. The fourth and final display in the Percy Jackson exhibit is from the scene where Grover escapes the Cyclops Polyphemus. Polyphemus also, by the way, one of the, it's the planet that Pandora is a moon of in Avatar. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The theater doors have also been decorated for the occasion to let you know that there is a special preview inside the theater. So again, we don't know when Walt Disney One Man's Dream will return. It will return sometime when this preview is over. Photos shared from this weekend's Walt Disney World Marathon show that runners passed by the Encanto ride construction, giving us a new ground level view of the show building at Animal Kingdom. It will eventually be the Casita and its adjacent show building. Our reporter shared these photos with us from the race in the morning, January 11th, showing runners on the route past the construction fencing and the steel framework of the Encanto show building. The crane, construction vehicles, and former Dinoland USA structures are visible through the fence. Another shot comes to us via BioReconstruct. Though known for his aerial photography of construction in the Disney and Universal parks, he also frequently shares photos from the ground. So here's that rare ground level view of the structural frame for the Encanto building seen during the race. The Encanto ride building has risen rapidly since officially going vertical back in December, with more steel being added almost every day and a crane towering over the structure. Guests often can see the crane in action during daytime hours, moving pieces of steel. The Encanto attraction will open with the Tropical America's Land in 2027, replacing Dinoland USA, which the last two pieces will close in early February. Dinosaur and Restaurantosaurus about to go extinct. Exterior construction work is now visible on the upcoming Level 99 location at Disney Springs. The space was previously occupied by the NBA Experience. As we noticed on a recent visit, steel framework has now expanded from ground to roof on that former NBA Experience building. On closer inspection, the steel framework appears to extend beyond the height of the existing building in one section, with other elements extending onto the roof. Framework can also be seen just behind the ground level construction walls. The scope of the exterior work is currently unknown. We didn't even know this was happening. We thought this was opening very, very soon. So kind of surprised to see them changing the exterior shape of the building. I didn't think they needed it, but we'll see how this all shakes out. Level 99 is set to open in 2026 at Disney Springs, according to the announcement from early December. A specific date is not known at this time. They're not willing to commit to an exact time frame. It offers adult-oriented interactive social gaming experiences with over 60 challenge rooms and duels. Disneyland Magic key holders are invited to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Disney California Adventure at a special event taking place from February 5th through February 15th. Magic key holders are invited to commemorate this milestone anniversary for DCA with nostalgic photo ops and familiar friends. Located at the Hyperion Theater courtyard, Magic key holders can experience some unforgettable moments during this California road trip themed event. As a souvenir while supplies last, Magic key holders can take home a specially designed postcard magnet set. Offer may be limited in availability. An eligible Magic key is required to participate. Limit one postcard magnet set per Magic key holder while supplies last. Again, this will be Thursday, February 5th to Sunday, February 8th from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Monday, February 9th, it will be unavailable. But Tuesday, February 10th to Sunday, February 15th, again, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., you can go and pick this up and check out this experience. Disney said there may be a virtual queue in use for this experience as well. You'll have to join that through the app. There will be an opportunity to join at noon for the day. The Disneyland monorail lost power on January 8th, leading to the evacuation of about 60 guests. There were no injuries reported. KTLA 5 reported that the Anaheim Fire Department responded just before 5 p.m. on January 8th. However, a guest who was stuck on the monorail told KTLA it lost power at about 3:30 p.m. Riders were all evacuated by 7 p.m. Firefighters helped them down the trains via ladders. A Disneyland Resort spokesperson said the monorail's beam lost power, affecting 2 trains. They were stopped near the entrance to Disneyland Park. Guests had to climb on those ladders to get out of the trains, but authorities said there were no injuries. One guest did climb on top of the Disneyland monorail train while it was stuck. A TikTok user shows someone, again, we assume a guest, crouched on the top of the monorail's lead car while the train was stopped. Though some theorize this is why the monorail was stuck for several hours on Thursday evening. Again, Disney said it was indeed a power outage. We assume the guests became tired of waiting and just decided to go outside of the train. Typically, this would get you trespassed or something, but I think given the circumstances, this guest is probably still allowed into Disneyland Park. But as of today, the monorails are operating once again. It does sound like this was a terrible situation for those who were stuck on the monorail. I will say, thankfully, this was at a cold time of year because I don't know if people know this, but in the summer, they typically close the monorail due to ventilation issues. In the heat, it is very, very bad. So if this was in July, we could have been talking some serious injuries. Some people could have been hurt by this due to the heat. Thankfully, it was a colder time of year and everyone's okay. But still, I can't imagine. It must have been, to be stuck in there for several hours and then have to climb out by ladder had to be a terrible experience. For the absolute latest on these stories and all that didn't make it into today's show, be sure to check WDWNT.com and follow us on all your favorite social media platforms. You can support the entire team behind the show and others by joining the WDWNT Interglobe Society at patreon.com/WDWNT. Get access to exclusive content, discounted show and event tickets, and more. Special shout out to our WIGS members watching who make this show happen every week. For the worldwide leader in Disney Parks news, this is Tom Corliss saying enjoy the rest of your today and have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.